throughout his childhood, he and Shariputra were great spiritual friends. They were always looking for, I guess, the answers of what life had in store for them. And I won't go over the huge story, but the two friends came across the realization of impermanence while they were attending a festival in their town. And upon this realization, they decided to abandon lay life, and they were looking for a spiritual teacher. They eventually found the spiritual teacher of the Vedic tradition, so they studied in Vedic philosophies, they participated in the debates, and so they were just all, but then they eventually outgrew their teacher. They learned all that they could, so they set out for a new spiritual teacher because they hadn't quite found what they were looking for. And upon leaving the teacher, they had promised each other, said, we're going to go our separate ways, but as soon as we figure out the way, as soon as we figure out the answers of which we are looking for, we'll come back together and we'll teach the other one. So as I said last time, Shariputra, he ran into a disciple. He said, oh, my teacher is the Buddha. And he said, can you tell me some of his teachings? He said, well, I'm still new, but I remember one. And the verse that he had told Shariputra was this one. Of all phenomena sprung from a cause, the teacher the cause hath told, and he tells too how each shall come to its end, for such is the word of the sage. And upon hearing this, Shariputra attains the first level of enlightenment, and upon hearing that, he goes to his friend Kolita at the time, and he tells him the same verse. They go to seek refuge in the Buddha, as this is the spiritual teacher they've been looking for, and they take along with them the 500 other debaters of their previous teachers. So that's where the 500 and the 1250 come from. But I talked about that last time. So then, 2 weeks after everyone had ordained as bhikshus under the Buddha, everyone had attained the status of arhat. Everyone had become enlightened. All 500 debaters said that they needed more time to develop their enlightenment, as it was of greater depth, to where it's analogous to getting kings ready for ruling their kingdom. They needed more time. Mahamoggallana, from progressing down his spiritual path, was the drowsiness that he had during meditation and during his practice. So then, while in a nearby village, he had this vision of the Buddha, and then the Buddha had advised him how to overcome this fault of drowsiness. And the Buddha had told him to get rid of drowsiness, you do this in these steps. So in this order, if one of these, give attention to the thoughts of sloth and torpor. If you're feeling drowsiness, do not give attention to those thoughts. If that doesn't work, mentally review the Dharma, which I have spoken to you. If that doesn't work, learn by heart the Dharma, so you can call upon it whenever you need its help. If that doesn't work, you shake your. He advises Mahamoggallana to get up and walk outside, wash your face, and look up at the sky. If this doesn't work, he says, establish a great perception of light, because the light itself will brighten up your own conscience. This will wake you up. If that still doesn't work, the Buddha says, walk around, take yourself on a mindfulness walk, take into account all your surroundings, what's happening to you. Lie down on your right side, be mindful and clearly conscious, keeping in mind of the thought of rising. So he pretty much says, you can go take a nap. But upon awaking from that nap, he says, you quickly arise and you think to yourself, drowsy. And upon hearing this advice, this is where he has his spark of enlightenment. This is where he becomes the arhat. And then, as I mentioned, Shariputra also became an arhat. But then now, as soon as they had attained their enlightenment, the Buddha then made these two their chief disciples. He made Shariputra. There was all the other bhikshus and all the other mendicants that the Buddha had that had been there for some time, and they were quite jealous, going, these two guys have only been here a few weeks. Why are they the chief disciples? And he had told them that in their past lives, Shariputra and Mahamoggallana had made a vow that they would become chief disciples in a future lifetime. So I'll quickly go over Shariputra, as he made the vow that he wanted to obtain great wisdom, great knowledge and insight. And his spiritual teacher at this time to gain up all this intellect. So each time Shariputra went into the next lifetime, he was able to retain some of this knowledge until eventually he met the Buddha, and then he was able to fulfill his wish of becoming the foremost in wisdom, hence the first chief disciple. Well, the Mahamoggalayana, on the other hand, they became friends in that sense. But then Shariputra had told him, you should probably, or he gave him this recommendation that it would greatly benefit your life if you were to become a chief disciple of a Buddha. And Mahamoggalayana, hearing this, said, that's probably a good idea. I'm going to go try to do that. So at that time, before Shakyamuni Buddha, there was the Buddha Anamadasi. And to show all of his bhikshus to his home for food and drink, and he fed them for 7 days. And that Buddha had told him, because of your merits, you will soon become, well, not soon, but in a future lifetime, you will become a chief disciple of a Buddha. So he made that vow to become a chief disciple of all these good deeds until eventually he had met Shakyamuni Buddha. He had then became a chief disciple. And so those two were the main chief disciples. Shariputra was superior in wisdom. Dhyana was spiritual penetrations. These are listed as, the first one is the heavenly eye, which allows him to see the affairs of gods and men in the 10 directionally beings. The third spiritual penetration is the knowledge of others' thoughts. So it's able to hear what other people are thinking and what they're planning. This could also mean, it's just this very great ability to read people, to see if, to look inside the person and even give them a teaching that person past life. And with this penetration, he's able to see the causes and conditions of things that he had committed in the past. So he could see, he caused this effects too. So he had this just great awareness of, if I did this in the past, it'll probably lead to this in the future. And the fifth spiritual penetration is the extinction of outflows. In this sense, outflows is meant to mean qualities. They don't put anything to practice. And so these outflows can be big, they can be small, or they can even be leaky, to where the leaky is more just like bad habits that go throughout lifetime. So they're overall good person, but they're kind of like improper in some situations. They're not as polite as they should be, to where eventually they reach the point of non-outflows, to where they're in a sense a perfected being, and they don't have any of these negative qualities. The sixth spiritual penetration is as you will it to be. By the phrase "as you will it to be," it's they kind of have control over their own reality, to where if they want to go to heaven, they can go to heaven. If they want to go to earth, they can go to earth. If they're swimming in water, they won't drown. If they're in fire, they won't burn. And I guess the extreme example is like, if they're in a room and there's a door, they say, I don't want to go through the door, I'm going to go through the wall. So things are as they will it to be. In a sense, this could also mean seen as being overcome by a sad event or suffering from grief, but you don't let that engulf your life. You don't drown in the sorrow and misery you're going through, or the going through fire but not being burned. As you get into a heated situation, you're not affected by other people's anger. You're able to stay calm and collected. Thus, you're not burned by the anger of other people. And then going to heaven, you're able to find your own happiness without figuring. If you want to go to earth, you can go to earth. In the sense that earth provides you with ground, where you're not shaken by anyone, you're not shaken by other people's beliefs, you're able to stay grounded. He uses these to visit his deceased mother and father. As the sixth one says, if you want to go to heaven, you can go to heaven. If you want to go to hell, you can go to hell. So he goes to heaven to go find his mother and father, but he only sees his father up there. And he says, well, what happened to mom? And he goes, so she was reborn as a hungry ghost. So he travels then from heaven down to the hungry ghost realms and finds his mother there. as reborn as a hungry ghost. Hungry ghosts are these beings of insatiable greed, to where they have these large pot bellies because everything that they eat just doesn't satiate them. They're always just looking for more and more and more. Then covers her mouth with the other as she tries to eat this rice, mostly because of her greedy behavior, to where she doesn't want to share it with anyone, but then she also knows these other won't bother her. So as she's eating, she's taking this rice up to her mouth, but as she tries to swallow it, it turns into coals and fire, and she's burned at the throat and cannot eat this rice. And upon seeing this, Mahamagdalena does what he can to help his mother out, to try to keep this rice from turning into coals. But even when he goes back to earth and he asks the Buddha, well, my mother's been born into the hungry ghost realm. Is there anything I can do to help her? He has the idea that, well, we could have an Ulambana ceremony. This is the ceremony that they offer food and drink to deceased loved ones in the 10 directions, or really any sentient beings. And through this, they gain this great act of merit that they can transfer on to their deceased loved ones. And Ulambana is, in a way, sort of like a Halloween event, in the sense that in some traditions, Halloween is seen as like they transfer at greater efficiency because the line between those two worlds is greater. So then thus, upon offering all this food and drink, he's able to transfer the merit to his mother. So he goes back to the hungry ghost realm after the ceremony and notices his mother's not there, so his efforts had succeeded. But not only that, but every other at the temple for years. That takes place on the 15th day of the 7th lunar month. Constantly communing with devas for the purpose of figuring out how they got there. So he's like, what good karma had you committed? What actions had you done to lead you to this realm? He did the same for the beings in the hell realms as well. He's able to communicate with them and see what actions did you commit that led you to, in his own realm, live a more moral life. He says, if you want a good rebirth, if you want good things to happen to you, these are the actions that you want to commit. This is the advice I've been given to by the devas and heavenly beings. So with using this, he was able to help a lot of people live moral lives, but that also, because there was more moral people, there was less immoral people. And the clans, or I guess the robber criminal clans at the time, had saw this as a great loss. Get rid of this Mahamagdalena, that guy, because he's kind of ruining our reputation. So then they had caught him one day while he was staying out in a tent. And the robbers opened up the tent to go, well, there's no one here, so I guess we'll come back later when he's arrived. And they had done this a total of 7 times, because on the 7th time, his spiritual powers had failed him, and they finally got to him. And Mahamagdalena was bludgeoned to death by these robbers. And when the knowledge of his death had reached the time, because in a previous lifetime, Mahamagdalena had committed one of the 5 unredeemable actions, which is killing your parents. So this is just something that he saw in the last moments of Mahamagdalena's life, that he kind of just let it happen. He realized that I had committed these atrocities, and this is just an effortless, the robbers had an effortless time killing him because he didn't put up a fight. This is something that he knew he had to go through. But then this also kind of shows really anyone can attain enlightenment. Though they had committed such atrocities in the past, they are redeemable. Anyone can be his story. The next Arhat I'll talk about, Mahakashapa he was born named, in previous lifetimes he was a great goldsmith, so people would come up to him and say, I need the statue of so-and-so, and he would produce these very elegant, very beautiful golden statues, and thus he has this golden glow. Live a spiritual life, but his father wasn't okay with that. He was always pestering him, going, when are you going to marry? When are you going to continue on the family lineage? And eventually, after enough pestering, he he broke down and he said, "All right, Father, I will marry, but under one condition." So he had then sculpted this skills from previous lifetimes of making. So he gave this impossible to match up to the statue. And so eventually he finds a named Bhadra. She would be married into a very wealthy family. They go, "No, you're gonna go ahead and marry this man because we with the family ties that our parents want us to partake in." Maha Magdalena had their own sort of aha moment of the impermanence of things in life. Mahakashyapa had a very similar experience while he was looking at his plowed fields. He then saw two animals fighting each other, eventually killing one another. Witnessing these two animals, they had this great sense of fear and pity for all sentient beings. They said, "This isn't the life that we should be living. We should leave the lay life to go take refuge in a spiritual teacher." So they had Pipali at the time, who was Mahakashyapa, runs into the Buddha, and he's struck with this term called dashara. Dashara is a sense of overwhelming emotion you get at seeing a holy person. It's sort of like they're just awestruck. They see this person. It's even good merit to look at them. So in his awe, he comes up to the Buddha and he asks, "I would like to ordain as a bhikshu under you." And the Buddha does accept him a new robe. Because Mahamagdalena came from a wealthy family, he had this nice, elegant robe, and he offered this to the Buddha. And the Buddha, in exchange, had given him his robe of rags. And it's said that only a person of great merit can actually give a Buddha, I'll talk about later, Mahakashyapa was the first patriarch of what is now the Chan or Zen Buddhism. And in Zen Buddhism, they believe in the practice of Dharma transmission. Folks was that first transmission of Dharma. And then this leads into Mahakashyapa's enlightenment, because during one of his talks, of the Buddhist talks, he has a heavenly being come down and gift him a golden lotus. And the whole assembly just doesn't take note of this, but Mahakashyapa sees this lotus, and upon seeing this lotus, he has this moment of enlightenment, but the other arhats had seen as well. This was more of a Dharma transmission of enlightenment, this mind-to-mind transmission. He was able to communicate with the Buddha. The Buddha had also told Mahakashyapa to live and develop 3 essential qualities. The first one is repenting for the things that you have done. So if you do something bad to someone, it's more to look back on that and go, I should have acted better in this situation. There's some things I can do to better myself. There's things I can do to better others. So that. The second one was to listen intently, and the third one was to act mindfully. And this third one goes into, not only was he the oldest bhikshu at the time, he was the one who lived by the most ascetic practices of all the bhikshus. And there was 12 of them that he is most praised for greed and to be grateful for what you have. So he doesn't have any elegant robe, he just has something to clothe his body. That's all that he needs. The second ascetic practice is wearing only 3 robes. And the 3 robes have different purposes. The first one is for visiting royal, for traveling, it's for going on alms realms. So this is the robe that they mostly stayed in. But having 3 robes and the alms bowl on the mat is supposed to ease a person of greed. So it's just to be content with the things that you have. The third ascetic practice is to always beg for food. This is to not cook for one. Oh, I just got a bowl of rice to eat tonight from my alms realm. I'm okay with that. It's just that I have something to eat. You're not discriminating on the food that you're getting. The fourth practice is to beg in succession, and that means to not discriminate when you go on alms realms. To where one of the faults that or I guess faults in quotation that Mahakashapa had was he would only go to poor communities. Give alms to an ascetic, to a bhikshu, they're gaining great merit for their next lifetimes. And then another arhat at that time, well, these people are rich, I'd like to keep them rich, I'd like to keep them being reborn in next lifetime, so I'll give my merit to them. But then when the Buddha heard this, he's like, this is not the way you should be acting. You shouldn't discriminate on where you get food. Because if they're giving you food, you shouldn't have a favorite. Everyone receives the same merit no matter what they're eating. One meal a day only in the middle of the day. And this has some background in that it's said that gods eat in the morning, animals eat in the afternoon, and ghosts eat at night. And the reason why you don't eat at night is because in the Mahamagdalena story, as they try to eat it, it turns into coals and it burns their mouth. So this is more of so those ghosts don't have revenge on the arhat. So when they go on revenge, they make all the arhats sick. It allows your body to get other things done because the action of digestion takes a lot of energy for your body to do. So it's really your body putting energy into other places. It also has the practical use of not spending a lot of time eating during the day, because as the seventh one is to not drink juice in the afternoon. So where I couldn't find too much about this one, why you don't drink juice, but this is one of the ascetic practices. The eighth one is to dwell in what is called an arend. There's no food there, there's no distractions, there's just only this quiet environment for you to either sleep or for you to meditate. So this is supposed to facilitate a better, in practice, is to dwell under the foot of a tree. And this is to encourage a nomadic lifestyle in the sense that you place for 3 days, as to not get attached to that one place. The 11th ascetic, this is to not be distracted by anything. So this is more to encourage a better meditation session. The 11th ascetic practice is to dwell things that I would like to do, because eventually that is the fate that will befall all of us. So this is more to, for the person to develop a spiritual urgency to get things done. The 7th or the 12th ascetic practice is to not let your ribs touch your mat, in the sense that when you meditate, develop vigor, and this is to ease the fear of suffering, because it does. I'm sure anyone who's meditated for a long time, as you sit in a long session, just sitting there, you will. So with these 12 ascetic practices, Mahakashapa became known superior in the oldest of the Buddhist disciples. And because of his ascetic practice, the Buddha had said, due to these practices, the Dharma will stay long in the world, to where the first Buddhist council. And he would eventually, like I said, become the first patriarch of what is now Zen Buddhism. And after developing the first Buddhist council, he then traveled to what is now called Chicken Foot Mountain. And the reason why he went here is because he wanted to fulfill the work of giving the bowl that was given to Shakyamuni Buddha to the future Buddha of Maitreya. So technically, he's still in the world. He went to the foot of the Chicken Foot Mountain, sat himself in a deep circle, transferring the bowl that was given to Shakyamuni Buddha from the four heavenly kings to. So these are the stories of the next two arhats. So we've gone over the first three. Shariputra, superior in wisdom. Maha questions, I'll see what I can do to answer them. If there are, yes, Alex.
My attention wave in the Buddhist things, could you repeat those two?
Yes, well, I'll go over the whole list again just so we can have them all. So the first one is the heavenly eye. The second, what did I say? The penetration of everything as you will it to be. You're welcome. If there are no other questions, I will give the floor back. If there are no other questions, I will give the floor back to.
Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Thank you, Guang Yin, for those festive stories of Mahamudgalyana and Mahakashyapa. The practices of Mahakashyapa alive to this day in Zen traditions. The practice of transmitting the master's robe and bowl is something that's still done today. It's kind of more of an ending. His selection of the next abbot is usually secret until the moment of him dying. And the only way people know who's the next abbot is dependent on who he gives his robes and bowl to. So it's usually a list, two, three monks, but it's only during the final moments of the abbot's death that they figure out who's going to be the next abbot. And so that transmission of robes and bowl is still something that's done to this day. And Zen is the only tradition that does that. In other traditions, other Mahamud is usually saved and enclosed and placed upon the ancestral shrine for people to kind of observe and venerate and meditate on. So it's not a practice that's done in our tradition, which is fine, because I don't think teacher's robe would fit me anyway, even if that was the thing. But it's still a pretty impressive tradition, I suppose. The mission of Dharma, I know superficially sounds a bit hocus pocusy, and without really knowing what that, without easy to fall into that trap of, oh, what is this, some like magic thing that's happening telepathically, right? But it's fortunately more practical than that, right? Usually it's a transmission between teacher and disciple is a traditional kind of path to that, but it's essentially the type of transmission that's done on a personal basis, right? The teacher would provide. And in these moments where the student has kind of an aha moment from that teaching, that's what it's meant by mind transmission or the Dharma transmission, meaning that whatever insight or wisdom that the teacher had, he passed it along to the student, and the student had come and realized because of that teaching. So it's a little bit more practical than I'm going to telepathically give you something, right? Which even for myself took a long time to kind of practice necessarily. So it's not something I really looked into much. But meditating on it makes a little bit more sense as to how that's actually accomplished or how that actually exists. But even on a larger scale, like during Dharma talks, during classes, during services, if any teaching monastic is providing a Dharma talk and a listener, I am transferring, or whomever is teaching is transferring the wisdom that's in their mind into your mind. So I hope we all have even in Vietnamese Zen, right, which is our abbesses, the nuns main tradition and the tradition that I was ordained in. The same that we have Chi as our patriarch here in the back. The Vietnamese Zen tradition has Mahakashyapa as their patriarch in the main shrine, and then Mahakashyapa in the meditation hall as their statue. Mahakashyapa is the first patriarch, and Bodhidharma, I believe, is number 6 or something. He's on the line, but demised the techniques of meditation as we know them today, as well as Chi. Chi has written quite a few treatises on Buddhist meditation that we continue to practice today. So we have all these, Chi is also one of the patriarchs of the Zen tradition as well, technically. But if anybody has any other questions or concerns, either for myself or for Kuan Yin, please enlighten us all.
Question, curiosity. One of the realms of existence, is that considered I'm coming up with this question because I watched one of the videos that we got sidetracked on. And we were talking about the realms of existence. This was from, I was watching a video on 5 hindrances of desire. That when you're in the higher realms, you don't have the capacity to, not capacity, you said for you were in human form is the best place to be because when you're in aspirations to move on. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the question is coming from. But I didn't know if Pure Land, this was one of those realms or not.
It is not. Pure Land is not one of the 31 realms of existence. Well, I take that back. And extremely complicated. So the Pure Lands, any Pure Land, right? Because all Buddhas have a Pure Land. Every Pure Land is linked to a specific heavenly realm of the it's more like a school, right? It's a boot camp. It's a boot camp because well, I wouldn't say boot camp because you can. All the 30 realms of existence are kind of like boot camp. These 31 realms of existence. But when you're in your Pure Land, that is your final destination, right? You are there to learn and to become enlightened. And once enlightened, you no longer have causes and conditions to be reborn. And so, no, it's not part of the 31 realms of existence. Yeah, the only difference is one, and you die, and in Pure Land, you're born, and then you just transcend. Yeah. Yes, it's a good question. Hence why our Buddhism, in order to be reborn and not worry about having to use up their karma and be reborn in a lesser realm of existence. Because as you're mentioning, yes, being born as a human is the best kind of location to want to be born in because we suffer, right? And though we think unsuffering exists, right? And so it gives us the capacity and the ability to see suffering for what it is and go beyond suffering, transcend suffering. Whereas in the higher realms of existence, because in some realms, though suffering does kind of exist, it doesn't exist to the scale that we know, the fourth realm of existence of the 31, right? So even realm number 5, right, the Asura realm, the Asura realm, they just live in such paradise, right, that suffering doesn't concern them. Want anything better or more than what they have, I mean, they want more, right? That's part of also their existence, even though they live in a better realm of existence, even though desire, right? And so they use that to feed themselves even more of their greeds and desires, and not give too much concern to end those desires and those cravings, right? And so the higher realm you go, the more better life is. And you're like, well, life is so great here. Like, why would I care about lessening my suffering? I'm gonna live for 1,000,000 years, right? And so they're not concerned with ending suffering. They're not concerned with ending the process. It's well, you are in these realms according to your karma, right? So karma is what's driving your rebirth in these realms. It's I'm hesitant because there's two ways of looking at this, right? There's the aspect of looking at these realms of actual locations or actual places of existence. And there's the process of regular life, right? Because not every day is a good day. We already know that, right? But not every day is a bad day either, right? Our days fluctuate between good and bad and neutral, right? It's not constantly good, it's not constantly bad, it's not constantly neutral. And because there's fluctuation, right, we can say that we live in these different realms of existence because each of these realms of existence have different characteristics. So Mother Mahamud Gayana is a hungry ghost because she was greedy in life. She did not want to give. She slandered the Dharma. She fed and offered this dog meat, covering it up as deer meat or whatever it is, right? Like, oh, this is healthy, but it's really dog, right? Like humans eat dog. And so because of her greed, because of her not wanting to give good meat to the monks and to the Buddha, she instead of give up her good stuff, basically, right? And so she's in the mindset, and she's a realm of a hungry ghost because she's greedy like that. But we can see that in our everyday life. We can see that in people, right? People are greedy, right? They may be pretty well off. They may have good jobs, good statuses, reputation, but in the types of mindsets that these beings are in. And this is why I'm saying, like, you can go in and out of this, right? We're not stuck in one state of mind all the time. We're not stuck in suffering all the time. We're not stuck in happiness all the time. We fluctuate between these feelings and emotions and moods and all the other psychological things that we go through in every day. Our default mode is a human realm because, again, you're here. You want to do something about the suffering in your life. You have or have had at least an aha moment of realization that suffering exists and you want to end the causes of suffering. And so you're doing something about it, right? But if you're rich and powerful and you have all the money and you're spending your weekends on yachts and traveling the world, then you're like, well, my life is so great. Why would I want to find out why I'm suffering, right? You're not worried about money. You're not worried about bills. You're not worried about this and that. And so you have no reason to practice. But us as normal people, we have reasons to practice. We have the sufficient means of why we suffer and why we don't want to suffer. And so we're doing something about it. Whatever you want to call it. Anything else? Transfer the merit to end today's class. Please join me in invoking the Buddha's name. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.